What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Light and Lamp podcast. I am here with Steve,
Hello.
as always, and today, just off the top, I'm going to tell you what we're not going to be talking about, and what we're not going to be talking about is the Islanders Lightning series that's going on. Game 5 is tonight. We're recording this at about 6 o'clock on the 15th. We're going to talk about that series when it wraps up. When that series wraps up, we'll do our series wrap up, and then we'll talk in depth about our Stanley Cup Finals thoughts and stuff like that. But today we're just going to be wrapping up the Vegas Golden Knights Dallas series, as well as talk about some other NHL news because there has been some stuff going on. So, do you want to start with the playoffs, or do you want to start with the other miscellaneous stuff that's been going on?
It's up to you, man. Take your pick.
Let's wrap up the playoffs, since I'm sure that's what most people are thinking about what's going on right now. So Dallas last night, they defeated the Vegas Golden Knights 3-2 in overtime, knocked them out in 5 games. Dallas Stars are moving on to the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time since the year 2000, where they lost to the Devils, I think.
I believe so.
So a lot of people weren't predicting this. Most people, including most of the NHL.com writers, a lot of other hockey media guys, they had Vegas going to the Stanley Cup Finals again this year. It's for the second time in 3 years or 4 years. What happened? Did Vegas lose? Did Dallas win? What did you make about this series? What do you make about what happened on the ice?
I guess I think it really came down to Vegas failed to capitalize on their opportunities, I guess, most of the time, because the games were close for the most part. They were in them. They just couldn't find a way to find that extra goal or two that they were finding against Vancouver. And Dallas's defense just seemed to step up and play big when they needed them to. So I don't really think anybody won or lost. I guess Dallas won, right? Dallas, in theory, just outplayed the Golden Knights.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of this series, obviously being interested in the way it was going, because I did pick Dallas to win the Stanley Cup Finals in my bracket. Look, for long stretches of a lot of these games, the Dallas Stars were outplayed. And Vegas outshot them, I think, every single game except for Game 1. They were tied in shots. Vegas outshot them every single game. I think by the end of the series, Vegas was plus 20 over the 5 games on their shot differential over Dallas. They just couldn't find a way to get past Anton Khudobin, who he deserves a lot of credit for this win. I mean, he was a friggin' elasto man for for 120 minutes in games 4 and 5. I mean, the amount of cross crease saves and just high level saves that this guy made, just unbelievable. And I think Khudobin deserves a lot of credit for this win. And Vegas's offense just couldn't get going. And I do want to clear something up. If any of you guys follow my personal account on Twitter, I'm sure you saw me kind of taking a jab at Golden Knights fans for blaming Robin Lehner for the series loss, which I don't understand how that makes any sense. He let in 8 goals in 4 games, so he only allowed 2.0 goals against average, including 2 overtime games. So it's not like he wasn't giving your team a chance to win. That offense should be more than capable of putting in more than 2 goals a night, and they just didn't. And if your goalie's only allowing an average of 2 goals a night, you got to find a way to win those games. I mean, really, that's more than you can ask from him. And Leonard was solid for them all playoff series long. He posted, at the end of the day, I think his goals against average was either 2 or just slightly below 2 for the playoffs. You cannot blame Robin Lehner for this series loss. People are saying, "Oh, Fleury was in the net. We would have done better." Well, was Fleury going to score you goals?
I mean, this controversy's been brewing since Alan Walsh, made it a controversy more than anything. Because prior to this, everybody was content with Robin Lehner starting because he clearly gave them a better shot every night to win. And that continues to be the case, but I doubt he'll find a home here in Vegas after the way the fan base and the media treated him following their less than stellar playoff run this year.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, I know I asked you this last episode, but a week later, now that their season is done, We saw what Robin Leonard did. He finishes the playoffs with a 1.99 and a 9.17. I mean, you cannot ask for better numbers from your goalie than that. If you're asking him to put up better numbers than that, you're just delusional. And look, I understand that there's an argument to be made. It's not the amount of saves, and it's not the goals against average, and it's not the save percentage. It's the timing and the quality of the saves he was making. But bottom line, end of the day, if he's letting in less than 2 goals, you have to win these games. You have to. If he's letting in 2 goals or less, you have to find a way to win these hockey games.
Especially if you're considering yourself, real contenders for the Stanley Cup. I mean, if we saw St. Louis and Boston do it last year, winning games, scoring collectively like maybe 4 goals altogether. So it was. You have to find a way to claw your way through those tight games, and I guess Vegas really just couldn't find a way to do it. They didn't look very comfortable playing that way either. It was kind of the thing.
And it was a weird press conference for Peter DeBoer. He said, that he thinks that the Vancouver series got in their heads and that Thatcher Demko kind of rattled their confidence on offense a little bit. There's just there's a lot of weird things flying around this Vegas Golden Knights hockey team. I mean, first of all, that doesn't really sound like something your head coach should be saying when it's his job to try and get offense out of this roster. And I mean, in theory, like you're spitting out a roster of Mark Stone. I haven't said Morgan Riley. No.
Jonathan Marchessault, Riley Smith.
Riley Smith's the one. Yeah. So Mark Stone, Riley Smith, Jonathan Marchessault, Paul Stastny, Max Pacioretty, Alex Tuck, and you're getting a lot of offense. The Vegas Golden Knights were second in the playoffs in offense from their defense. You have to find a way to put pucks in the back of the net. And your coach is like, well, we got rattled by the last series. Well, that was the second round. Is it not your job as a coach to move your team on to the next series?
And I don't buy that either because, again, whatever you think, I mean, these guys are professionals. Do you really want to believe that, like, a hot goalie rattled them going into the next round when they still managed to beat said hot goaltender? They won. So I don't really imagine that being a sticking point for them because if they were still thinking, wow, Thatcher Demko is really good, he really held us off the score sheet, they could always just fall back on and find solace in the fact that, well, we won anyway, so it doesn't matter. We don't need to worry about that. We can keep scoring goals. And they just couldn't seem to find a way to keep doing that against Anton Khudobin, which, I mean, they had the bad luck of drawing 2 hot goaltenders in a row, but that being said, like, you have to find a way.
Yeah, I mean, you got to put the puck in the back of the net. And listen, if they had lost Game 7 against Vancouver and Peter DeBoer was like, well, Games 5 and 6 with Demko got in their heads, it's like, all right, well, at least at that point you're still playing Thatcher Demko in Game 7, so you can make that argument. It's like you can't let the ghosts of the past round be fighting you in the next round.
Right.
Especially, when this is not a young team. If Vancouver... If the coach of Vancouver Canucks, so Travis Green, had said that, it's like, all right, they have a lot of guys for like 24, 23. This is their first playoff run. They're going to be emotional. They're going to carry that emotion from previous rounds into the next round. But if you're a Stanley Cup contender, you have to say, okay, well, we won. Who's next? You can't be looking back at round 2 when you're playing in the Western Conference Finals, when you're losing in the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah. When your season's on the line, it really doesn't matter what Thatcher Demko did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and Vegas was up 2-0 in Game 5. It was a big comeback in the third period by the Dallas Stars. They just found a way. They got a playoff goal from Yoel Kiviranta, who, I mean, like, let's talk about this kid for a second. Where the hell did he come from?
Who knows, man? But he's having a playoff run for the ages.
It's just absolutely stunning how well that Kiviranta is doing in Dallas, and they just seem to find ways to score goals. It's not very pretty. I mean, in Game 4, Joe Pavelski scores a goal off a deflection where he tried to backhand on a net. It went off the defender's stick and just rainbowed over Robin Leonard's head. Last game, they get a goal where Corey Perry gets pile-drived into the goaltender on the power play. I mean, these Dallas Stars are just finding ways to score goals in unconventional manners, but it's winning them hockey games, and you're getting absolutely next-level goaltending from Anton Khudobin. And obviously, I mean, you're still getting the play that you're getting from guys like Miro Heiskanen, Klingberg, Lindell. They have some guys who need to get off the schneid. Like Tyler Sagan's been kind of invisible for them this playoff run. But yeah, I mean, you're on to 5 points in 8 games, 4 goals, like
a game, 2 game winners,
a series winner, yeah, and a game tire last night. I just mean like the team is just clicking in ways. I mean, Heiskanen has got 22 points, Jamie Benn's got 18 points. Guryanov picked it up after round 1. He's got 17 points. I mean, they're just getting these players to buy into the system, and I mean, Hudobin's stats are just absolutely ridiculous. In that series, he was making 25 saves, 24, 38, 32, 34 down the stretch in the last 3 games to post a 950, 970, and a 944 save percentage. I mean, just absolutely stunning stats from him. And I just don't know what to... So I guess we'll go... because we know what this means for the Dallas Stars. I mean, we've been saying this for a long time, that this is a team that should have been competing far earlier than this. And I'm comfortable with them going into the Stanley Cup Finals, still saying that I think they do have a chance to beat either of the teams of the Islanders or the Lightning. So I guess 2 questions for the Golden Knights is, a week later, are your opinions changed? Like, if you're George McPhee, what are you doing about your goaltending situation? Are you signing Robin Lehner? Are you letting him walk? Are you going to try to convince him to play a platoon style when the indication this season was that he wanted to start full-time somewhere? What are you going to be... If you're George McPhee right now, what are you doing about this situation?
I don't think anything really changes, especially considering like the backlash they've gotten to this whole Robin Lehner situation. I think it's best for everybody involved if either he leaves the team or they let him leave. Because I think Marc-Andre Fleury just has too many, I guess, chips on the table in Vegas. He is like the face of their franchise, and for them to bail on him after that, him giving them so many good years, or trying to platoon him with a goaltender who very clearly does not want to platoon, isn't really fair to either one of them. So I think if you're George McPhee, you got to just let him go. He's going to hit the market, and somebody's going to pay him.
Yeah, I think from a hockey standpoint, my opinion, if I was George McPhee, I mean, Robin Lehner is 6 years younger. He's 29 to Marc-Andre Fleury's 35. And I do think that this is a Knights team that can compete for another good 3 to 5 years. I mean, a lot of their pieces aren't really over the hill quite yet. I think from a hockey standpoint, it would make the most sense to keep Robin Lehner in Vegas. It's a great fit for him. He's ready to start competing. The team is obviously competitive. I just don't see it happening because I don't think George McPhee wants to walk that road. And that's not to say like he's a coward or anything, but I just don't think from a hockey team standpoint it makes sense for him to keep Lehner here when it's clearly been such a distraction. And by no fault of Robin Lehner. I mean, he did literally nothing to bring this upon the team. It was literally all Alan Walsh and the fans, like, just dogpiling on him for no reason. And I think for Robin Lehner himself, I think it's best for him to find a team that he's the guy. He's the number 1 starter night in, night out, and there's no question anymore. I think he's proven to everyone that he can do it. And Robin Lehner probably sees the writing on the wall that this is going to be a very good offseason for goaltenders because there's a lot of teams that are ready to compete that need it. I mean, Robin Lehner can go to any of Edmonton, Carolina. I don't think he'd want to go back to Buffalo because I don't think anybody wants to play in Buffalo right now. But he would be a good fit for them. So Edmonton, Carolina, Buffalo, Calgary, if they're looking to upgrade their goaltending situation, which I think they are, these are competitive teams that he could bring to the next level.
Right.
So I do think that the writing is kind of on the wall for him to be leaving Vegas, although I think from a hockey standpoint, you want to keep him. But from a reality standpoint, it's probably best for him and for the team if you just start next season with Marc-Andre Fleury in the net.
Right, and then sign a backup, whoever hits the market this year, because you did trade away Malcolm Subban.
Yeah, so you'll probably, you can get Thomas Greiss. I would say Jake Allen, but he's proven over the last 2 years that one bad season wasn't on him and that he's still a really good goalie in this league. If you could try to convince Henrik Lundqvist if he gets bought out to come to Vegas and play with Fleury, which would be really weird seeing Fleury and Lundqvist on the same team.
It may be weird seeing Lundqvist in anything that isn't Ranger blue.
You could probably trade for like Jonathan Bernier if you wanted to. I mean, he's put up a decent season with that horrible Detroit team. So, if you're also, I guess, just to wrap up Vegas this season, is there any change that they need to make to the roster, or do you think it's just come back next year and see what happens?
I think you just come back and see what happens, right? I mean, I don't think there's any big glaring holes in the roster. I mean, maybe a little more speed, maybe a little, like, a little more, like, high-end skill, but they just still have guys who are, making their way into the lineup from their first draft, Cody Glass, guys like that. So maybe next year's their year. Who knows? But
I know these long-suffering Golden Knights fans. I feel so bad for them.
yeah.
I do want to say, I know he's not going to hear this, but, Zach Whitecloud, my heart goes out to you. Just an awful, unfortunate circumstance for the penalty last night. He made the right play, and that's the really unfortunate part. He did everything right. There was nothing he could have done different. He tried to swipe the puck away from the onrushing attacker, and if that puck is flat, that puck goes into the corner and we keep playing. Unfortunately, the puck was on end, so when he took a swipe at it, it went right out of the rink, and that's your series right there. Dallas is moving on to the Stanley Cup Finals. So I know everyone that's ever played hockey has been in that position where you take a bad penalty. Well, it's not. He didn't even take a bad penalty. You take a penalty and it ends up in the back of your net, and unfortunately, it costs your team a big game. But like I said on Twitter, and like I've seen a lot of outpouring of support for him. You feel horrible for him. He's a 23-year-old kid who had a fantastic playoff run and does everything right, and the puck doesn't respect the right play, and it goes out of the rink. So tough play, but he did everything right, and there's nothing he could have done on that. Just unfortunate circumstances, and to see he was basically in tears in the penalty box was a little rough to see, but that's the game,
That's hockey, man.
So if he does ever hear this for some reason, just keep your head up, kid. You did everything right, and that's just the way she goes sometimes. So Dallas is moving on, Stanley Cup Finals, first time since the year 2000. And I honestly, it's kind of weird for me because I'm genuinely okay with any of the three remaining teams winning a Stanley Cup. I mean, obviously, I would prefer the Islanders to win the Stanley Cup, but
right.
In years past, it's not like, I got to root against Washington now, or like, I got to root against the Bruins now. Now it's just like, yeah, okay.
Whoever wins, wins.
Do you have any final thoughts on the Dallas-Vegas series?
No, not particularly.
So we'll move on to some NHL news. Like I said, we're going to save the Islanders series for whenever that wraps up. If it happens to wrap up tonight, the Stanley Cup Finals are supposed to start on Thursday, so we'll have to try to throw something together tomorrow for our little preview. We'll see what happens there. But so we'll talk about some NHL news. We'll go around the horn here. We'll just start. The trades have been heating up a little bit recently. The first one was Carolina traded Joel Edmondson's rights to Montreal Canadiens for a 5th-round pick. Carolina traded a 5th-round pick for Joel Edmondson, so they kind of just ended up neutral on this one. Joel Edmondson is a unrestricted free agent, so Montreal would have to sign him unless he just walks, which would kind of be garbage for Montreal because, why did you trade a 5th-round pick for a guy you weren't going to get signed? I'm really curious as to why Carolina is trading him away unless he just told them he wasn't going to sign with them, because this was a trade we were both really excited about when it happened. We thought it really, solidified this Carolina defense as one of the best in the league, if not the best.
I mean, I guess the play of some rookies in the playoffs might have been a big indicator of which direction. I mean, was it Hayden Fleury really took a bigger role for them in the playoffs and seemed to look good doing it? So maybe it's just a case of, well, we would like to keep him, but it just doesn't make sense to with all the young players they have that could take that spot.
Yeah, and that makes sense. From Montreal's perspective, I mean, do you think that this is just another Jake Allen move where they're just acquiring pieces that they know other people are going to want? Because, I mean, we saw last season defensemen coming at a premium. this offseason, goalies are probably going to be coming at a premium. Do you think that this is just Montreal trying to gain some assets before everyone wants them, and then kind of just be like the oil baron guy, be like, well, if you want this, I have him, and like trading away these guys? Or do you think that they
maybe
might actually end up using him?
I think that, I mean, it couldn't hurt to have Joel Edmondson on that Montreal roster. I mean, they were already pretty defensively sound, and then so they're essentially just doubling down on it now, right? And it really gives them another option. I mean, their top four becomes honestly pretty solid with Shea Weber, Ben Sherratt, Joel Edmondson, and Jeff Petrie. I mean, that's not terrible, but I still don't think it makes them any better of a team. I mean, in terms of like being competitive.
Well, where does this leave Victor Mete then, if you're keeping Joel Edmondson? Because I think that's a big question.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe Montreal's management seeing something with Mete that we're not, so maybe they're not as confident with him, and this could be a signal of that. Or maybe they're just, like you said, just acquiring assets to hold on to. They're just hoarding. They're trying to corner a market.
Which wouldn't be the worst thing. I think this offseason is really going to tell us the direction that the Montreal Canadiens are going as an organization. I know we've both said in the past that they really ought to just, tear it down and rebuild. First of all, I can't see them keeping Jake Allen just because you can't have $15 million in goaltenders. Like, it's just not going to work like that.
Not a great idea.
No, especially because you need help up front more than anything. So having $15 million tied up, I mean, most teams have like 8 to 10, and Montreal has 15. Especially with the cap being as flat as it's going to be for the next few seasons, you just can't do that. I could see them holding on to Joel Edmondson, and I could just as easily see them traded away. My personal hope is that they end up trading him away, because I do think that this organization needs to take a turn towards rebuilding. And Joel Edmondson's a nice piece, and I think you're going to get the max trade value. I mean, he's been shipped around for a 5th-round pick, but maybe you hold on to him towards the trade deadline in the middle of the season when teams have injuries, guys are getting hurt. Maybe there's a team that really, really needs a defenseman, and you can upgrade that to maybe like a 4th or a 3rd-round pick in that draft. But I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to get a pick for this upcoming draft, because it's supposed to be really deep. Supposed to be one of the deepest drafts we've seen in a long time.
I guess it really depends on, I think the value, that what he's getting traded for, is indicative more of the contract status than it is of him as a player. I mean, on an expiring contract or on a short-term contract. I mean, when Montreal traded for him, it was for an expiring contract, and then they essentially got an expiring contract. I mean, when Carolina traded for him originally. So it was more or less the rental value. Whereas I think if Montreal managed to sign him to maybe like a really friendly deal for like $2-3 million, then I think his value goes up. You might be able to get a second, maybe a late 1st-round pick out of him.
Yeah, and I do think he's a good enough defenseman to warrant that.
Yeah.
He's a solid two-way defender. He can bring you some offense if you need it. He can bring you some snarl to your game if you need it. He brings a lot to the table. I just really hope he doesn't just walk on a free agency, because then this whole thing was kind of pointless for Montreal, and they don't need to take yet another step back.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the most Montreal thing to do, though.
Well, we actually talked about it in an earlier episode that this playoff run might actually be a really bad thing for Montreal to have made it out of the qualifying round, because it might go to management's heads. And do you think that might be the case here, where they're saying, well, wow, we beat the Penguins, and the Penguins are a great team?
I think maybe. I mean, I think the move, I don't know what the goaltending move is suggesting, because Carey Price was fantastic for them. So I don't know what that's saying, but I really would like to see what the rest of the offseason shapes up like for the Canadiens before I make any judgment, because Joel Edmondson could just be a nice piece either way. I mean, it really doesn't. It's not a bad move or like a great move. It's just a nice little addition to your defense if you really think that that's a hole that you have to plug.
Yeah, so Carolina Hurricanes trade Joel Edmondson to Montreal for a 5th. He has not signed a contract yet. That trade was made only a couple days ago, and they still have time to get that done. We'll stay on the trading block here. The Minnesota Wild acquired Nick Bjugstad for a conditional 7th-round pick. Pittsburgh's retaining 50% of his cap hit, so Wild will only be responsible for $2.05 million. 1-year contract, so he's only going to be under contract for next season. 28-year-old center. He only played 13 games last season, put up 3 points. He was hurt for pretty much the whole year. Only ended up playing 45 games total for Pittsburgh over 2 years. Yeah, he seems to really have an issue staying healthy the last couple of years. 32 games, 13 games.
Well, I mean, that's probably why he's only worth the 7th-round pick, right? You never know if the guy's actually going to touch the ice.
Yeah, and if he ends up getting banged up for the Wild, I mean, they could just LTIR him and just get $2 million of free cap, essentially. But I guess, my reaction to this trade is, I guess it's kind of worth it for a 7th-round pick. Why not get a guy who, when he's healthy, is a pretty good third-line center? And if he's not healthy, well, you only paid the 7th. But I also don't think that this is what Minnesota needs to be doing at this point. They barely made they were pushing for a playoff spot, but then they get beat by the Vancouver Canucks in the qualifying round. So they didn't make the main bracket. Dubnyk is only getting older. You still have the Parise and Suter contracts. I don't think that acquiring 20-year-olds is the move unless they flip him. But if he's hurt all the time, how are you going to flip him for anything more than a 7th?
Which is what you paid for him.
And if you get a 6th-round pick out of it, was it really worth going through the hassle of acquiring Nick Bjugstad and then trading him for a 6th-round pick when you paid a 7th? I mean, is that really going to change the shape of your franchise at this point?
Not particularly. I mean, it is kind of a strange... This is one of the Bill Guerin's first real moves as a GM of the Wild, and I really don't know where it's going.
It kind of just feels like he studied what the last GM did and was like, that. I'm going to do that.
That's how it looks.
Acquiring these ready-to-play players who are in their 28, 29, 30-year age range, only for the team to just not address the issues it has and then just be stuck in this perpetual cycle of mediocrity that they've been stuck in essentially since they've signed the Parise and Suter contracts. This team has just been mediocre every single season, and it kind of feels like this is another continuation of that. I don't really see the long-term play here because he's only under contract for this next season. So say maybe you get an 82-game season out of him, or even if you're lucky enough that he plays 60 to 70, and then are you going to sign him because now he's 29? Are you going to be competing in the next 3 years?
Well, God forbid you sign him, right, and you get the only healthy year of the late years of his career, and now you're stuck with a contract you can't trade because he's injured all the time, a la Nathan Horton.
Yeah, yet another contract that they can't move off of this roster. I'm not seeing, with the Joel Edmondson trade, we can see the future plan. With the Jake Allen trade, we can see the plan in place. Okay, it's going to be a good market for goalies. Jake Allen proved that he can still start behind Jordan Bennington, so let's get him while he's cheap, flip him for another team who needs a starter. We'll probably upgrade what we paid. Same deal with Joel Edmondson. This one kind of just feels like a trade to make a trade for a guy that's over the last 3 seasons hasn't played more than 32 games in any of those seasons. And do the Wild need yet another role player? I mean, you have Mikko Koivu on your 4th line at this point. How much farther down the depth chart are you going to bump Mikko Koivu before you're like, listen, this guy's got to retire?
Yeah, I don't really know. And, I mean, Nick Bjugstad's a solid, when he was healthy playing in Florida, I mean, he's only ever played 1 full NHL season. But when he was playing almost complete seasons in Florida, 76 games, 72 games, he was a pretty productive guy. He was scoring 20 to 25 goals. But, I mean, those 20, 25 goals are nice, but is it worth gambling on if he's even going to play 5 games?
Well, that's what I'm saying. At this point, is another 20, 25 goal scorer going to gonna change the way the Wild play. I mean, not really. Like, if this was a guy that had once reached the peaks of 50 goals and you were hoping that maybe we trade a really cheap pick and he gets back to 30 to 40 goals and changes the way our offense works, okay. But when he was healthy, he peaked out at 49 points, which isn't bad, but is yet another 50-point guy going to take this Wild team from mediocre to contenders. Because I think maybe that's what Bill Guerin's idea is. He's like, look, we're not going to be able to trade these Parise and Suter contracts. Let's just try to get something out of these years that's meaningful. But is it worth it? I don't think so. And is it going to happen? I don't think so.
Well, that's kind of it. That was my next plan, which is like, even if that was his idea, like, how feasible is it really?
It's not. You don't have the wiggle room. You don't have the assets, and you don't have the cap room on this team to do that. You just don't.
You really, like, that's it. You kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, you just don't.
So let's stay in Minnesota because they just recently signed Jonas Brodin. He signed a 7-year, $42 million contract, average of $6 million.
I'm pretty sure it has a no trade clause in the first 5 years, and in the final 2 years, it's got no clauses in it.
I believe that's the case. Let's just do a quick. If we just do a quick search here. Oh, it's probably going to be on Cap Friendly, actually. Shout out to Cap Friendly, by the way. One of the best resources on the internet. In the final year, it has a no-move clause. So in 2020... Oh, no, that's this year. Wait, what is his renewed contract? Here it is. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. So for the first 4 years, it has a no-move clause. Which... I mean, good on them for not having that no-move clause extend when he's past 31. But if you want to rebuild in the next few years, it also means that he has to agree to move. Which, I mean, for a guy like him, he probably would because he's worth it. I mean, he's a solid two-way defenseman, solid top 4 kind of guy. I mean, can play top 2 in a pinch, so he'd probably agree to move. But it's also like, what if he just doesn't want to go anywhere?
What if he just holds the team hostage?
I mean, what do you make of this contract for Brodin?
I mean, for him, it's great, right? He managed to get what is probably fair market value for him. But like he said, I don't know if this is particularly great for Minnesota because they're kind of locked in for at least 4 years now with this guy. And if they want to rebuild, he's not old, but I mean, does he really want to stick out those 4 years on a rebuilding Minnesota team?
Yeah, I think that, you know, for Jonas Brodin, it's a great contract because he has that option if he doesn't want to go anywhere. He doesn't have to go anywhere for at least 4 years. For the Wild, it could work out just because, like, after he's 31, that no-move clause goes away, so they could trade him away in his older years. The question is he going to be worth $6 million by the time that no-move clause comes up? That's questionable. In theory, if Brodin agrees to waive the no-move clause, great. I think a lot of teams at this point would pay $6 million for Jonas Brodin. I think that's fair. You know, it's not a great contract. It's not like, oh, he's only making $4.5 million, but it's not crazy. He's not making like $8 million or anything like that. I think it settles in that this is a fair deal for Jonas Brodin situation, but. And as the Wild, you couldn't let him walk. That's not an option for you at this point, just because.
No, yeah.
You're so asset poor, you need every possible asset, and maybe they're looking at Jonas Brodin at this point as an asset in that, look, we're probably going to be able to maybe get like a third out of him if we trade him, which is something that they desperately need because they're so prospect poor at this point that when the rebuild happens, it's going to be long and painful.
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense for them to get him under contract. You know, you maybe could have tried to give him a shorter contract without the no-move clause. But I don't know. I don't think Jonas Brodin is a Minnesota Wild for more than 3 years, though. Because if this year made the Wild think that they could possibly compete because they quote-unquote made the playoffs, I think if and when, in theory, next season the playoff format goes back to the way it was, and they get the brutal reawakening of, well, we're not a playoff team, they're going to see that, look, we don't need a 28 to 29-year-old defenseman who's ready to play now, because we've been saying it for the last, how long? 4 years probably. Minnesota really needs to start rebuilding, and
they need to get younger somewhere.
I mean, they've got some decent prospects in net. Capo Kakinen is supposed to be a really good goalie for them, but outside of that, they're incredibly prospect poor because they've just wasted all their picks and prospects trying to keep this roster relevant.
They have that Russian kid, don't they? Wasn't he like number 3 on like the TSN list?
Yes, they do have a nice forward prospect, if I am correct. Let's see if I can find it. I do know that, kind of just off the top of my head, like I said, that they're definitely going to be... It's going to be a very long and tough rebuild for this team, just because... Listen, like they've spent the entirety of the Parise Suter era trying to get anything out of them they could when they've never even made it to the Western Conference Final. Not even once.
They really didn't even get very close.
No, I think they've made the second round twice. I know they eliminated the Avalanche that one year, and I was pissed off because I put the Avalanche to... I think I put the Avalanche to go to the Stanley Cup Finals that year, and then they got blown out in round 1, and that really pissed me off. But let's see, Central Division. Oh yeah, Kirill Kaprizov, who's supposed to be coming over next season.
Right.
He's gonna be in a weird spot too, because he's gonna be like one of the only young guys on a team full of like old, like, it's kind of like it's kind of like when you get a knee injury as a young guy and you walk into the doctor's office and it's just like a bunch of like old men who just like have broken kneecaps and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're just like, huh, well, okay. And you're like, what'd you do? And he's like, I'm just, I'm old. And it's like, well, I actually hurt my knee, but all right. So he's gonna be in a weird position, but I think my ultimate feelings on the Bukestad trade is I don't understand it. I mean, from Pittsburgh, it's just a cap dump. The guy hasn't played.
Oh, well, yeah.
And they need the money bad because they're probably going to try to compete again next year. They're probably just taking this as a mulligan. Well, we got beat by the Canadiens, but we got beat in the playoffs. Let's see if we can run it back next year. But for the Wild, don't understand. But we'll see. And the Brodin contract, I think it's great for Brodin, kind of just okay for the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah. I think somebody will be happy to have him.
Oh, for sure. I mean, because he's not going to retire in Minnesota. I can't see it.
No, definitely not.
So we'll stay in NHL Newsland. Peter Laviolette was hired as the Washington Capitals coach who canned Todd Reirden after they lost to the Islanders in 5 games. Peter Laviolette, as we know, was a coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. Then he went to the Nashville Predators, and now he is back in the Metro Division with the Washington Capitals. What do you make of Peter Laviolette? Does he fit well with the Capitals? Do you think he can take them to that next level again?
I think hiring a coach of his quality is always a good signing, no matter what. The second winningest American-born coach of all time behind John Tortorella, Stanley Cup champion. Been to 2, 3 Stanley Cup Finals. So there's no surprise. There's no surprise to say he knows how to win, right? He knows how to get a team over the hump and into to be competitive. And I think really that's just kind of what this Washington Capitals team needs. They just need a little kick in the rear, and I think Peter Laviolette's proven that with veteran teams he can get the most out of them. He did it with Nashville until the bubble finally burst. And that's not on him, that's on, the GM for not looking to correct the issues in the roster.
Do you think it's a better fit scheme-wise? Because we talked at length about how Todd Reirden was essentially trying to be Barry Trotz 2.0 and it just wasn't working. we saw Laviolette get some pretty good years out of Giroux and company in Philadelphia, and he probably would have had them in a couple of Eastern Conference Finals and Stanley Cup Finals if it hadn't been for some really erratic goaltending that he was kind of forced to use. Because I mean, going back in our history books here, he kind of was forced to use Ilya Bryzgalov because you can't have that much money sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
Even though Bobrovsky was for a long time the better guy. Do you think that maybe it's a better fit for a guy like Peter Laviolette, who likes to emphasize his defense and likes to emphasize the flair from his offense, as opposed to Todd Reirden just trying to be Barry Trotz 2.0?
I mean, I certainly think so. I think we'll see the Capitals probably their power play will probably get back to their normal rate instead of almost bottom of the league where it was this year. And I think their offense will probably take a big step forward. But I mean, it'll be helpful, but I don't know if this is like this is going to solve the issues with the Capitals. I mean, there's still some pretty glaring issues, specifically one in the net. They don't know. I mean, you got Samsonov, but you don't know what you're going to get out of him in his second year. You never know what you're going to get out of anybody, any rookie in their second year, and now it's going to be your starting goaltender.
Yeah, and like I said, I personally like it because when Laviolette went to Nashville, we saw Nashville transition away from the years of Shea Weber and Ryan Suter we're a defensive hard-nosed team, and we got Pekka Rinne, and we don't score a lot, but we have stellar defense. Whereas him going to Washington, or when he went to Nashville, we saw a little bit of more spunk out of their forwards. I mean, obviously having a guy like PK Subban helped to generate that offense from the back end. A very dramatic. I don't know. The word spunk just keeps coming out, like a very energetic type defenseman.
Yeah, but I mean they have John Carlson now, so.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. Like, he knows how to get the most out of his defensemen, and going to a team like Washington, who has John Carlson, maybe he can help him. I don't want to say go back to form because he's probably going to win the Norris Trophy this year, but maybe he can just find the offense's rhythm
season
again.
Form, yeah.
And I get it. I understand. When Washington won their cup, they were playing a different game. They weren't just playing high flying, balls to the wall Washington Capitals hockey that had gotten them knocked out of the playoffs early in years past. And maybe there's something to be said that you don't want to go back to that high flying offense because you were always constantly first and second rounded. That being said, without Barry Trotz, they got first rounded. So maybe, because you don't have the assets anymore, I mean, you don't have the pieces in place to play a defensive style as well as you did in 2018. Maybe in these older years of Ovi's career, we're just going to lean into it. We're just going to try to score and just be the Washington Capitals that we have the talent for, and just see if we can get back there.
I think it's probably their best bet, right?
And I think Laviolette's the guy to do that. I mean, do you think that maybe they could have gone with somebody else, like Gerard Gallant is still out there?
I mean, Gerard Gallant would be okay, but I think when you have a team that has such a specific identity that you need a coach that can coach that team. And Gerard Gallant's notorious for having just okay teams be highly competitive, and this Capitals team isn't okay. This is a good team, and they need somebody to push them to the next level, and I think you need a great coach for that. And Peter Laviolette was probably the best coach left in the market.
Yeah, and it was interesting because Jeff Ward got his interim tag removed in Calgary. He's there to stay now. He's the head coach there, so they stayed internal. Do you think it's good that after promoting Todd Reirden that the Capitals went outside the organization to try to bring something else in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it brings a nice, it'll shake the room up nice enough because he has no connections to anybody in the room from any prior experience. I mean, Todd Reirden knew all the guys, knew everybody in the room, so he had a unique relationship with them already, and then he tried to essentially make himself Barry Trotz 2.0, which might have honestly hurt his attempt because he might have built a unique relationship with all of them based on Todd Reirden, and then when he tried to be Barry Trotz, they might have just chafed underneath. the drastic change in the relationship. Whereas in this, there's no stakes involved at all. It's just he's a new coach. He comes in and he gets to know everybody the same as everybody else.
Staying in Washington, the GM himself, Brian McClellan, said today that he expects Braden Holtby to go to free agency. He said he talked briefly about where he's at and the kind of opportunity he's looking for. You pointed out Ilya Samsonov is going into his second year. He's played all of 26 National Hockey League games. And granted, pretty good season for the rookie this year. But he's played 26 NHL games. And this is a Capitals roster that doesn't have 3 to 5 years in the tank to let him get up to speed. You probably have 3 years of competing maximum left.
Well, I don't really think they can fix that though. There's really not a lot of money in the budget to go out and find a goaltender.
Well, that's the question that that on everybody's mind here is, well, what do you do? Because there are going to be guys like, there's going to be your premium high dollar value guys, right? Your high value goaltenders are going to be, your Braden Holtby and your Jacob Markstrom are probably going to command like $8.5 million. And then you have your next tier of guys who are going to be probably in your like 6.5 to 7.5 range, like your Robin Leonard, Matt Murray. He's an RFA this year. They got to figure out what they're doing with him. His name has been thrown around the trade block a whole bunch. You can probably honestly get a guy like Matt Murray on a deal for like $7 million given his shaky play last season.
The only thing is, these are guys on the Penguins that the Capitals would have to trade for, and there's other factors outside of hockey involved where...
AKA we hate each other.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't trade with one another.
So there's going to be guys that they could potentially afford if they move assets around. The issue is, well, how do you do that?
Well, how do you do it and stay competitive?
Because the Capitals need to sign. They're probably going to let Kovalchuk walk unless he wants to take like $2 million to be a third liner. Brendan Dillon, I would re-sign him if I was them. He's the kind of defenseman that they need.
I'd let Radko Gudas walk. I mean,
you can sign Jonas Siegenthaler. He's a fine player. So they're gonna walk into this offseason with projected to have basically $9 million in cap room to sign. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You need a 12th forward, and you're probably going to want to carry some injury guys. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you need a 12th forward and 2 defensemen minimum.
And a goaltender.
I mean, you could go in with Samsonov and Phoenix Copley if you really wanted to.
They're probably going to. They have no choice, really.
Where's all this money on this team? Well, I mean, okay, Kuznetsov's making 7.8.
I mean, Nicholas Backstrom's extension kicked in, so now he's making $9.2 million.
Yikes.
I mean, the Tom Wilson contract isn't even like that bad. The Lars Eller one is okay, I guess.
It just looks like you know what it is? A lot of their depth guys are still making 8-figure contract, or not 8-figure. What? 1, 2, 3, 6, 7-figure contracts is the issue. They don't really have like the fourth line guy that's making like $700,000 besides Nick Dowd. So it's like none of these contracts are really outrageous. I mean, yeah, of course you're gonna pay Ovechkin $9.5 million. You're gonna pay Nick Backstrom $9.2 million. You're gonna pay Kuznetsov 7.8, which actually that's probably a really good contract for him. It's just that like Carl Hagelin's also making $2.75 million, and Richard Panik's also making $2.75 million.
When ideally, you'd probably want them making maybe $1.5 million.
Yeah, so I mean, you could trade some of those depth guys if you can find anybody to take those contracts and shuffle that depth around. But then you run into the issue of, well, now the Washington Capitals aren't deep again.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
They're damned if they do. They're damned if they don't, right?
In my personal opinion, I think I hate to say this, but a guy like Thomas Greiss is probably like a perfect fit. That 1A, 1B type guy where if Samsonov struggles, well, I mean, Thomas Greiss has proven time and time again he can play, and he can play in big games. I mean, he posted a Game 7 shutout this year. He plays like 30 to 40 games for the Islanders every year. I think he's the perfect fit. Could they
afford him is really the thing. How much do you think Thomas Greiss is going to make?
So if I'm correct, if I pull up the Islanders, I think he was making $3 million this year. He really might just be like your only, if you're gonna try to shore up your goaltending at all. He really might just be your only option. He was making $3.3 million, which if you trade away 2 of your depth guys, that's your money right there, because he's probably not going to ask for anything more than that, honestly, especially if you sign him to like a 1 or 2 year deal. He's probably going to ask for just like 3 again. Yeah, they're in a tight spot in Washington. They really are. I think that would be the move, is trade 1 or 2 of those depth guys that are making a little bit more money than you want to pay them. Maybe just ship them to a team like Detroit and toss them like a 4th or 5th round pick as like a here, take my bad contract type trade, and sign a guy like Thomas Greiss, because you're not going to get a Robin Leonard. You're not going to get a Jacob Markstrom.
You just can't afford to.
No. I knew it was bad, but now that I'm looking at it, it's real bad. I didn't realize that they were that tight up. I thought it was like, oh, we'll let Holtby walk and like, because we don't want to pay him $9 million. But it's like, no, we like literally, even if we didn't sign anybody else and we went into the season with 4 defensemen and 11 forwards, we still can't afford Braden Holtby.
Pretty much.
Oof.
Big yikes in the Capitol.
Yeah, I think that whatever ends up happening in net, this is like the last big hurrah for this Washington Capitals team as far as competing goes, because this is unsustainable. I mean, you can't.
The bubble's gonna burst. I mean, there's just too much money that you just can't afford it.
And then, of course, that happens to every championship team. At some point, the bubble bursts. But it's like, this is like,
it's kind of dramatic.
You're standing next to the bubble with the thumbtack, and you're like, I'm gonna do it. And it's like, yeah, but maybe we can hold back for like a year or 2. And it's like, well,
can you really though?
So interesting times. I mean, so we think that Laviolette's the right move. We'll see if he has anything in net to work with. He might get goalied again, which would be really unfortunate for him.
Oh my God, imagine.
Yeah, I don't know. Just hard times. And Braden Holtby, you'll find somebody to pay him. Like pretty much all the teams that I mentioned. A team like the Carolina Hurricanes could really use a guy like Braden Holtby. A team like the Edmonton Oilers could really use a guy like Braden Holtby. I mean, he could just be like the next version of Grant Fuhr, where he's just kind of okay in the regular season and then he turns it on in the playoffs.
I mean, in terms of Edmonton specifically, he would shore up a lot of question marks that are on the Edmonton blue line.
Well, the biggest issue in Edmonton is that you're locked into
Mikko Koskinen.
Yeah, and I think he's got 3 more years after this?
I think it's 2 or 3.
Let's see. Where are our Edmonton Oilers here? Mikko Koskinen has 2. So he has next year and a year after, and he's still got that modified no trade clause. Still making $4.5 million. So if you sign Braden Holtby, you're going to be putting $12 million in your goalie basket. But I mean, with a defense like you have, you kind of need to.
Yeah, and you need to ice some sort of roster that can go somewhere when you have Connor McDavid still up front.
You mean getting gassed in the qualifiers to the Chicago Blackhawks isn't good enough?
No, who then went on to get gassed by the Vegas Golden Knights? Yeah, no.
I mean, I think that would be a good fit, a Braden Holtby in Edmonton. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. I don't know if it's feasible with the amount of money. It looks like they're going to have like $10 million and they have to sign Ethan Bear, and they're probably going to want to keep Anthony Ciu. You probably let Ennis and Riley walk if you wanted to, although, again, you keep putting these Band-Aids on your depth and then you keep ripping the Band-Aid off like you need your depth players, but I mean, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I'm really excited, actually, to see the goalie market this season and how it shapes up. I'm very excited. And for once, I can say that my team doesn't need to be involved in the goalie market after having, like, 45 goalies over the last, 10 seasons or so. Is there anything going on in the NHL that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
All right, so next episode, like I said, I don't know when it's going to be. It could very well be we just do a quick 30-minute thing tomorrow talking about the Stanley Cup Finals. If the series ends tonight, we kind of have to because the Stanley Cup Finals is going to start on Thursday.
Right.
So I don't know when the next episode is going to be, so just kind of stay tuned for that. We're definitely going to try to do an episode before the Stanley Cup Finals start, just to talk about the two teams, talk about, in depth. We're going to really break it down position by position, who has the advantage, who has this and that and the other thing. Really do a full deep dive into the two teams going into the Stanley Cup Finals. So that might be tomorrow. It might be a week from now. Who really knows what's going on?
Yeah.
So just stay tuned to the channel and the Twitter account. We'll let you guys know when the next episode is going to come out. After that, we're going to talk about when all the awards are announced. We'll talk about all the awards because I want to do that all in one show. I don't want to be like, well, this guy won this award, because they're doing it really dumb by announcing it before the first games, which is really annoying. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up, though. We're doing our Stanley Cup Final preview, the awards when they're all announced. We'll do an episode on that. NHL entry draft round 1, we're going to do a live reaction to the top 10 picks, which is going to be a lot of fun, obviously. And then after that, it's free agency time, and this year's shaping up to be a really, really exciting free agent frenzy. There's going to be a lot going on, so stay tuned for all of that. Other than that, just congratulations to your Dallas Stars for advancing to the Stanley Cup Finals. We'll see. Perhaps they get an opponent tonight. The Lightning could end the series tonight. We'll see. Other than that, stay tuned to the channel. Stay tuned to the Twitter account. A lot of cool content coming your guys' way. I'm super excited to bring it to you guys. I'm super excited for everything going on this offseason. And I think that's it.
Yeah, I think so.
So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys again next time.